Hello, this is Patrick. I'm just driving along here going to get my wife from work, and I had a brainstorm. Anyway, that brainstorm was about starting a new YouTube channel called Paramedic Pat. Channel where I tell some of my stories. I'm also going to intertwine what it's like to be a paramedic, some of the other adventures we get into, some of the personalities of the paramedics I worked with, and EMTs. Diverse group of people. They really are. They were back then. But we all had one goal for the most part, and that was to help people. And that's why, for the most part, we all got along. It was an adventure, one that I'll never forget, and one that I think changes us all that do it. I'm not talking about a profound change in your personality or anything like that, but I'm talking about becoming more aware of the many, many things that can affect people in this world. I saw people hurt and get sick in ways that I never would have imagined. That's what this channel is going to be about. I have a sense of humor. I love telling a good, funny story, too. So some of my stories will be funny. Some of them will be sad. But hopefully they'll be entertaining. I'll tell a little bit more about my career as a paramedic as I go along. You'll get to know me. What I'm going to talk about today is the one true save that I was associated with as a paramedic. Now, this was back a long time ago. This was probably in the early 90s, maybe. And we got a call one day for a full arrest. The heart's not beating, full arrest. So my partner and I rolled out, and we were informed by the dispatcher that one of our first responders, an EMT, was there on the scene and had started CPR. Okay, that's good. Somebody close by started CPR. Luckily, it was fairly close by to us. We rolled up, we grabbed all of our equipment, went in the door, and here was our first responder, Betty, a firefighter and an EMT, and she was doing one-person CPR on this lady that was about 65 years old. She lived with her daughter, and her grown daughter, had told us that her mother said she wasn't feeling well. And as it progressed, she complained of chest pain, and they decided to take her to the hospital. Actually, luckily for her, before they got her out the door, she collapsed. I know that sounds bad, but that was actually lucky for her. It saved her life. They called 911. Luckily, Betty, the first responder, was literally a block away. She was out and about doing something. I think she's getting ready to go shopping or something. But she had her pager on. And she responded. And she went in the house, saw the lady on the floor, assessed her, started CPR, started effective CPR. Betty was a CPR instructor. We were there fairly quickly. We went in the door, and we were carrying our monitor defibrillator, which back then weighed like 40 pounds, was in a big Halliburton case. And our first aid kit that had all the equipment we needed to intubate people and give medicines and all the things that paramedics do. So that's what we did. We got there, and the first thing I did was hook her up to the monitor. Actually, we didn't hook them up to the monitor first back in those days. We could actually see a rhythm through the paddles. If you've watched some of the old TV shows and the show Emergency and some of those, you'd see them put the paddles. They'd pull them out, those big round paddles with the handles on them and the red button that they pushed. And they'd put that down on the patient's chest and say, oh, they're in VFib. Well, in this case, she was. VFib is what we call a shockable rhythm. If the heart's, and what it is, the heart's fibrillating. It's just shaking like that. It means it's still got some electrical activity in it. The systole is where the heart's just stopped. You don't shock a systole. It won't do any good because there's no electric activity. But anyway, she was in VFib. And immediately I did the old pull the paddles up. My partner put the dielectric grease on there. I did the old rub the paddles together to kind of smear the grease around. And I put the paddles on her chest. And she was in V-fib. And so I hit the charge button. And it's funny, it makes this real high squeal. Is the capacitor's charge. And then you get a green light, red light, everyone's a little different, or it shows on the meter. It's up to the amount of power you want to put through the person's body. They're all a little bit different. And you push down real good pressure and you do the old clear. That was always a big deal. Everybody puts their hands up out of the way like this. And I pushed the button. Now, I'd done this many times before, but the difference was our protocols had just changed a week or two before. Up until then, if somebody was in ventricular fibrillation, they still wanted you to give them an ampule, a little vial we carried. You see it where they pop the tops off of them and screw it together and shoot it into the vein. Up until then, we were supposed to give epinephrine. It's supposed to make the heart more susceptible to being shocked. So we did that. Yeah, but you wasted a minute or two sometimes getting the IV. You could shoot the epinephrine down the endotracheal tube, but then you had to get them intubated. But they decided that if they're in V-fib, shock them as soon as you can. So that's what I was doing. I charged, I hit the button. She did the jump like everybody does. And lo and behold, I waited a second and I saw an actual heart rhythm. It's what we call sinus tachycardia. It's a normal rhythm, but it's fast, running about 120, 30 beats a minute. But then in paramedic school, they teach you, well, it could just be the electrical activity. The heart may still not be actually beating. So feel for a pulse. I reach down to a carotid artery. I feel a pulse. Now, I actually, in my brain, shouted. I didn't shout for real, but in my brain, I kind of did. Because it was the first time I'd ever got anyone actually back. So, that was a big deal. But we keep going. I try to put the tube in her lungs. I was the only paramedic there, so I had to do the advanced care. Now, Betty and Shirley, both big hands. They were getting everything I needed and helping me. That's what we do, work as a team. But when I went to put the tube down in her lungs to make sure she had a good airway, she actually gagged on the tube. Now, that's actually a good deal. That shows she was actually responding to things. So we put her on oxygen and we got an IV and we took off for the hospital. By the time we got to the hospital, she was moaning and groaning. She wasn't able to answer my questions, but she was becoming more and more aware of, and waking up to some extent. And we took her in, and we didn't often follow our patients, but when you have something that rarely happens to where your patient actually, you start the heart again, and they're moaning and groaning when you get in the hospital, you want to make sure they made it. Because sometimes, hour later, day later, the heart stops again. But in this case, this lady, about a week and a half later, was actually able to walk out of the hospital under her own power. She lived another 10 years that I know of for sure. Betty kept track of her because Betty was responsible for that save that day. Now, it all worked as a team. The shock started her heart again, but Betty started effective CPR. And that's why we had a heart to save, a heart that would start beating again because it was oxygenated. So, always a team effort. And I'm going to get on my soapbox a little bit here and just let everybody know learning CPR is a good deal. Actually doing CPR on somebody that needs it is even better. I have heard people that told me they took the course and learned CPR, but when it came down to the day that they needed to do it on somebody, they either didn't want to or afraid to. Some people say, I'm afraid of hurting them. Hard to hurt someone whose heart stopped. You can only go uphill. If their heart stopped, they're going to be dead soon. starting CPR, even if you don't do it exactly correct, is a whole lot better than just standing there and watching them die. So that's my little soapbox today. If you learn CPR, be willing to use it. It truly works. It truly saves people. So anyway, that's my story for the day. One of my true saves as far as cardiac arrest. Now, once a week, I'm going to try to put a video up. I'll tell you a little bit more about my experience. Some of the adventures we had early on with, dealing with doctors and nurses. And no, it was an adventure. And I'm going to tell you about a lot of those things. Hopefully you'll like this channel. Like they say, subscribe to it. Everybody does the subscribe thing. And I'll tell you more about a book I wrote about my EMS experiences, life, death, or somewhere in between. And I'll put a link so you can order that book if you want to. So that's what's going to happen. And hopefully I'll be able to get some subscribers, get people that like my channel. And if you have any questions or anything, put them down there at the bottom, and I'll be looking and try to answer them for you. So hopefully I can actually get some people that want to watch and listen to the stories I tell. Hopefully you'll think that too. All right. Well, that's my story for the day. I'm sticking with it. And we'll see y'all down the road a little bit. Bye.